Welcome to our Thursday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. Today I am continuing to teach on financial stewardship. This is a series that I've got. I've got DVDs and CDs on this. Also, I have a book on this that I've written, and it's in English and in Spanish on financial stewardship. We also have DVDs that show the testimonies of people who've gotten hold of this truth about being a steward and how it's prospered them. We also have workbooks, just a lot of materials. And this is my third week. I'm nearing the end of my third week of teaching on being a steward, a financial steward of what God has given us. This week I've been using Luke chapter 16. It's a parable of what I call the unjust steward. And this is about a man who was stealing money from his master. His master heard about it. He confronted him and said, "Get your books in orders. I'm going to examine it, and if what I've heard is true, you're going to be put out of the stewardship." So the man was guilty. He knew he was going to lose his job. What he began to do was call in every one of the people who owed his master money, and he discounted their bills anywhere from 20 to 50%. So he was still taking his master's money and stealing it, but instead of using it for his own things, he began to start giving it to people who owed his master money. And it makes it very clear in verse 4 that he did this for the reason of when he was put out of the stewardship, he could enter into their houses, that he could mooch off of them. They would feel obligated because he had given them these huge discounts in what they owed his master money on. And so in verse 8, this is what was really confusing for a long time, is because the master, when he found out what his servant had done, commended him. And I spent 2 days talking about the attitude of the master, a very godly attitude where you don't look at your assets and see them as the real asset, but instead you see your relationship with God as the thing that produced all of these assets. That's what's really valuable, is your relationship with God, the favor of God that causes you to prosper. As it says in Deuteronomy 8:18, gives you power to get wealth. This man was so focused on God that when he saw somebody stealing his money, he was detached enough from that he was able to compliment the thief. And then yesterday I began to talk about what was it in this unfaithful steward that was worth commending him over. And what it was is that this man finally, under pressure, was forced to start thinking about his future and planning for his future. And so he began to start using the money that he had control of, his master's money, to plan and prepare for the future. And this is why the master commended him. And I tell you, today, most people do not use money to plan for the future. Instead, they just think about the immediate thing. They go and they put themselves in hock up to their eyeballs, and they don't even think about the future. It's just, can I pay today? And if there is the slightest little bump in the road, if there is a downturn in the economy, if they were to be laid off of their job, if there was to be any problem, most people just implode because they don't plan for having extra. They just think about, what can I do today? And they will put themselves in debt and hawk their life up to the maximum. We're doing this as a nation and as individuals. And this is not wisdom. This is what this parable teaches against, that we need to plan for the future. Now, this man in this parable, he was planning just for his temporary future in this life. But in the application or the interpretation of this parable, Jesus made an application that goes far beyond this life and into eternity. And here's what Jesus said in Luke 16:9. He said, "I say unto you, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness." That's the King James wording for money. Make to yourselves friends of money, that when you fail, and this word fail literally means to die. It was translated that way other places in the Bible. It says that when you die, they may receive you into everlasting habitations. This is talking about use money to touch people's lives in a godly way. Use money to influence people in their relationship with God, so that when you die, there will be people lined up in heaven to welcome you into your everlasting habitation. Man, can you understand how important this is? You know, there was a song, kind of a country song, that was about a man who had a dream, and in this dream he died and went to heaven. And when he got to heaven, there was people lined up and they started saying, "Thank you for giving to the Lord. I'm a life that was changed." And this man said, "Well, when did I ever touch you?" He saw people from other nations. He saw people that were of different color. He saw people that he never saw in his life on the earth. And yet in heaven, all of these people were lined up to thank him for the impact that he had on their life. And so he says, "When did I ever touch your life?" And they said that when you gave to that missionary, when you were in your little church and the missionary came through and you gave, he used that money to preach the gospel to me. And I got born again. Other people, you know, they were touched in different ways, but it was all through the money that this person had given to preach the gospel around the world. He had people lined up to welcome him into eternity. Did you know that that song is just basically a dramatization of what Jesus talked about right here? This is what Jesus is saying, is that you can use money to affect your future, not just your temporal future. Yes, we're supposed to do that in this life, but we can use money to affect eternity. This is huge. Most people have never thought of this. You know, in the United States, I know that this program is being viewed all around the world, so not everybody may not get this. I may have to explain it. But I often say that you never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul. For those of you that don't live in the United States, a U-Haul is a moving thing that we rent to move our belongings and stuff. So it's just a way of saying that you've never seen a hearse pulling a trailer, or, you know, when a person dies, they don't leave this life with all of their assets. You can't take your car, you can't take your house, you can't take your jewels, you can't take any of these things with you. They may dress you up and put you in a fancy dress or a fancy suit. They may have rings and jewelry on you when they bury you, but I guarantee you, when you go back to the Lord, when your soul returns to the Lord, it's not taking anything with it. The Bible says you came into this life naked and you are going to leave naked. You don't take anything with you. Everything physical that we amass in a lifetime, whether it's gold, silver, paper money, coins, whether it's jewelry, diamonds, one of the hardest substances known here on the earth, it doesn't matter what it is, the Scripture teaches that someday this earth is going to be dissolved and everything in it. If you build your house out of steel, I can guarantee you it may outlast you. You may die before that house falls apart, but there is coming a day that God is going to destroy this entire earth and everything on it with a fervent heat, and the houses built out of steel, your best jewelry, your diamonds, the hardest substance known to man, everything is going to be dissolved and gone. Everything that we consider to be valuable in this life is someday going to be gone. You know, money is an institution that man created. God didn't create money. When He created Adam and Eve, He didn't put money in their pockets. They didn't have pockets. Amen. There was no money. Now, money is not evil. Jesus used money when He was told about, doesn't your master pay taxes? He told Peter to go catch the first fish and take the money out of his mouth and go pay his taxes. Jesus had a treasurer that followed Him around, and He had women that followed Him around, and they ministered unto Him of their substance, is what the Scripture says. So Jesus used money. Money is not evil, but it's not a real godly institution. If sin hadn't have entered into the world, there never would have been a need for money. So money is not a God system. And when we get to heaven, there's not going to be money in heaven. God paves His streets in heaven with gold. One of the most expensive things that we have here on this earth is nothing but pavement in heaven. There isn't going to be money. So the point that I'm making is money, jewelry, assets, anything that you consider to be valuable is temporary. It is going to be destroyed. It is only for this life, only as long as the world endures. But this world is going to be destroyed, and we are going to live for eternity without these things that we consider to be so valuable. So everything physical, tangible, money is going to pass away. So here's a profound truth, that you can take something that is temporary, money, jewelry, gold, assets, and you can turn it into something eternal. How do you do that? Well, you can't take it with you, but you know what? You can send it ahead. When you take money and invest it in the gospel, in changing people's lives, preaching the truth to them and seeing lives changed, marriages healed, bodies healed, people set free from depression and discouragement and anger and bitterness and hatred and unforgiveness. And when you invest your money in the gospel and you change people's lives, you are taking something tangible, money, and you are turning it into an intangible, a changed life that literally in heaven, people will come up to you throughout eternity and thank you for touching their life. You can take something that's going to perish and turn it into something that will never perish. I don't know if you understand that, but if you really understood this, if you understood the privilege that we have, God gives us money, and we can take, it's going to pass away. If not in your lifetime, it will pass away when the earth is destroyed. It's not going to last forever. It's temporary, but you can take something that is temporary, and by investing it in changing people's lives, using it to touch other people, you can change it into something that will never pass away. If you really understood that, and the privilege and the power that we have to take something perishable and turn it into something imperishable, something that will never pass away, I guarantee you it would change your whole attitude towards finances. Instead of thinking, oh God, how little do I have to give to keep you off my case, to fulfill my obligation, and how much can I amass? How big of a house can I live in? How nice of a car can I drive? And all of these things. It would flip-flop that attitude to where, God, how little do I have to be a good steward and provide for my family and be a good representative for you here on this earth? How little do I have to get by? And how much can I possibly put into eternity, into changing people's lives that will help populate heaven and decrease the population in hell? When you understand that, it would change everything. Now let me just say that God does want us to live nice here on this earth. God is El Shaddai and not El Cheapo. I am not saying that God is against us having nice things, but it's really all about priorities. You know, I've got a friend that lives in over $1 million home, and he drives these really nice cars. He's got a fetish for cars. That's a weak spot. And I mean, he drives some expensive cars, and he's a pastor. And I've had people criticize him over that. But what they don't realize is that he gives a huge percentage of what he gets away. It's not really how much your house is worth, how much your car is worth. It's how much do you give away. See, God doesn't just look at what you have. He looks at what you've given. He evaluates things on percentages. And a person who has a lot of money flow through and lives in $1 million home, and yet he gives 80 or 90% of his income away, God looks at him as being more frugal than a person who may live in a $200,000-$300,000 home, but they just give a pittance to the Lord. They give a small amount. They just tip God. God looks at that person as being a better steward. God's not into just being cheap and all of this stuff. I'm not preaching that, but I am saying that your heart has to be you live to give. You don't give in order to live. It's not all about you getting things. You know, I'm not a perfect example, but I am reflecting what I'm saying here in my life. That my wife and I live in a home that we built for $60,000, and this has been 26 years ago. And at that time, that was all we could afford. We stretched ourselves as far as we possibly could. It's probably about a $120,000 house when we built it, but a builder had mercy on me and gave me that house at his cost. So I got it for about half of what it was worth. But I'm saying that most of you, or many of you watching this program, live in a nicer house than I live in. I drive a Ford Escape. And I'm not against people that drive these fancy cars and all of these really, really nice cars, but I've got a driveway that's about 20% grade. It's a gravel road. And if I had one of these real fancy cars, I've got a four-wheel drive car. And if I didn't have one, I couldn't even get up my hill in the summer, much less in the winter. I have to have these kind of cars to be able to get up there. And what I'm saying is I'm prosperous. I could go out and drive anything I want to. I could live in $1 million home if I wanted to. But how many bedrooms do you have to sleep at night? I mean, how many beds can you sleep in one night? How big does your bathroom have to be for you to be able to take care of business? I've literally been into people's bathrooms that are bigger than other people's homes. And I'm not saying, it all depends on the percentages. It all depends on a lot of different things. If you have a lot of money flowing through, it's just some's going to stick to you. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the person living in $1 million home, but I am saying that there's a lot of people that their idea of prosperity is just get all that you can. It's all for you, and it's all about you having bigger this and bigger that. I'm saying that this parable, Jesus is saying, use money to touch people's lives so that when you die, there will be eternal rewards, eternal benefits. There are going to be many people who had a lot of money in this life, and they had big houses and big cars, and they had the admiration of people. But all of that's going to be gone someday. And in heaven, they're going to be there, and God's going to supply them with a mansion. They aren't going to live in a shack over in the corner of glory land. They're living in a mansion. God, by grace, is taking care of them. But I do believe that there's varying degrees of rewards in heaven, and there's going to be people who were movers and shakers and lived in great luxury here in this life, and in eternity, they aren't going to have people coming by thanking them for touching their life. But there are other people who maybe didn't live in these really huge mansions. They didn't have the fanciest of everything, but they were faithful to take what God gave them and put money into the gospel to reach people, to change people's lives. And they are going to have people lined up as far as the eye can see, thanking them for touching their life, for making a difference. You know, there's people who are partners with this ministry. And you may not have all of the great things according to the standards of this world, but you've invested in this ministry. And I tell you, we're seeing people's lives changed. I actually have a testimony of a person who was on a scientific expedition at the South Pole. And a previous person who had been there, you know, they go there for like 6 months, and because of the weather, they're just literally stranded there for 6 months at a time. And a previous person on one of the scientific expeditions at the South Pole took a whole library of my teachings, and they left it there. And so this other person, when the next group came in, out of boredom, I guess, they got to listening to my materials that were left there at this scientific expedition on the South Pole, and they got born again, and they were changed. And you know why that happened? Because we give our materials away. Somebody enabled me to do that. Somebody gave money and enabled me to give an entire library to this person who took it to the South Pole. And those of you who gave and enabled me to do that, someday in eternity, you're going to have this man who is on this expedition at the South Pole come up to your mansion and thank you for your investment. And you'll be visiting with them, and they'll be thanking you for caring enough to put your money into the gospel and change their life. You've never met this man in this life, but you will in the next. And not only that, but we reach people all over this world. We get letters and testimonies from people all over the world. You're going to have people of every race, of every nation, of every color, of every creed, every different religious background, and they're going to come to your mansion and they're going to thank you for giving money into this ministry to help us reach all around the world. And there are going to be thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, millions of people whose lives were changed because of you giving into this ministry. You took something, money, tangible, that is going to perish, temporary, it's going to pass away, and you turned it into something eternal. And I can promise you this, when we get into eternity, there is going to be many people come and hug me and kiss me and thank me for getting that money out of your pocket. Because after all of these things in this life are gone, after this world is gone and there's a new heaven and a new earth, and when our values get put straight and we understand, there's going to be people who thank me for helping them to do something eternal with their money. You aren't going to resent the fact that I encouraged you to give and help me to build a Bible college where we could train people and send people all over this world preaching the gospel. It changed the lives of thousands of people. And someday in heaven, those of you who've given into this ministry, you are going to have people come up to you that were at that Healing is Here conference. And they're going to thank you for the impact that it made on them. And this is going to be just like when you drop a stone in the water and ripples go out. People are going to go out and share with others. I've already had testimonies of people that have gone home and seen family members healed and people set free, and people are coming alive to the power of God. And those of you who give into this ministry and help us reach out and do this, people's lives are being changed all over the world. And if you understand this, if you could ever get this picture that you have these temporary things, money in your hands right now, but you can turn it into something that's eternal, something that will never pass away. It will change people's lives. And for eternity, 1,000,000 years from now, people will be coming up and thanking you for the money that you gave to me to help me preach the gospel, to your church, to other ministries and things. The money that you put into the gospel is money that never leaves your life. It just enters into eternity, into your future, where it grows and multiplies, and it'll come back to you 100-fold in this life and in the world to come. If you understood that, it would totally change your attitude towards money. Instead of thinking, how much can I get and how much can I accumulate, you would say, how little do I have to live a good life, and how much can I possibly put into eternity? I tell you, this would change your attitude. This is powerful.
Andrew gave me the confidence to know that the Word of God was true and God will do His part of the deal. And so when I saw scriptures like give, it'll be given unto you, pressed down, and other scriptures about prosperity, I was able to take that, believing it, and move ahead and operate in giving, believing for a harvest and getting harvest every time. Once I did that, I made more money than ever. He showed me how to prosper.